The chefs know it. The chefs have a dirty secret, but they're willing to make money. They're willing to say one thing and do another thing, because every chef knows. Hello, Chef Marcus Guiliano here, and I'm your chef on a mission. Let's talk about farm-to-table restaurants today. So, farm-to-table restaurants, I want to talk about the one farm that a farm-to-table restaurant should not be using. So, many of you know, wow, the sun here is just crazy right now. Let's see if I can make a turn, get a better image here. Cool. Ah, man, look at that. So the one farm that farm-to-table restaurants should totally avoid, and you know, that's sort of an oxymoron. You're a farm-to-table restaurant, so why wouldn't you be using farms? So most farm-to-table restaurants, a few deer crossing up here. Wow, quite a few, a whole herd of deer, about a dozen or so, right through the snow. Beautiful, beautiful. So farm-to-table restaurants, you go on their website and they preach purity, pure food, wholesome food, natural food. That's sort of the premise. That's like the overall premise of when you see farm-to-table and what their websites say. However, that's much different if they're serving this one item from a farm, and that is farmed salmon. See, the majority of farmed salmon are farmed in open pens, in a pen system in the ocean, in the bays in the ocean. And this causes detriment, massive detriment to the environment. First of all, salmon farming is hard to do to begin with because you need so much more protein. You need 3 times the amount of protein, so 3 pounds of other protein to make 1 pound of protein for salmon. So it just doesn't make sense. It's just it's a backwards equation to begin with. Now, salmon farms are happening all over the world, in Australia, New Zealand, Chile in the southern hemisphere, and the northern hemisphere from Norway, Scotland, Faroe Islands, Maine, up into the east coast of Canada. And then on the west coast, Washington State is just now going to ban non-native fish farming, which is fantastic. British Columbia is trying to get rid of fish farms as well. The First Nation tribes up there are fighting their hardest to get rid of salmon farms. Because what's happening is these salmon farms are destroying the environment. When you put that many salmon together in a farm, there's disease, there's lice, there's, in the case in Canada and Norway, there's something called Piscine virus, which then spreads out into the wild fish, and Piscine is a heart virus. So you're being told that farmed salmon is heart healthy, it's good for your heart, when in actuality, a lot of the farmed salmon you're buying has a heart disease itself. And when this heart disease, this Piscine virus goes out into the wild, what happens is this wild salmon can no longer swim up the stream. They have a hard time swimming up the stream to spawn. So of course they're now never going to make it to their roots to spawn, which is now killing. That's just one small reason what's killing off the wild population. So what's happening is they keep putting fish farms in the ocean, and they keep telling us that we need to eat. Fish farming is going to supply the future of especially for salmon, that it's going to supply the future, because salmon is it's almost non-existent in a lot of areas. It's on the endangered list, wild salmon in certain areas. But what's happening is all these farms keep coming in, and the wild population isn't improving. The wild population keeps going down and down and down. It's not something in British Columbia. Last 30 years, the wild population has gone down. That's why the natives want them out, the First Nations, because they don't have anything to fish anymore. And I keep saying the statistic, almost 70% of whales can no longer carry full-term pregnancy because they have no salmon, they have no food supply out in the ecosystem in the ocean. So salmon farms, and I see a lot of farm-to-table restaurants that will serve salmon. They love to serve salmon, and it's salmon farm salmon. Now, a lot of them, if you ask them, is this farm salmon you're serving? A lot. Here's our dirty secret. They know that the farm and Sams are doing a bad job. Some of them are buying organic salmon, which is no better, or sustainable salmon, which is no better. There's no right way to do the wrong. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. That's the premise of this. So the chef's dirty little secret is, well, yeah, our farm is different. It's natural. It has no antibiotics. It has none of this, none of that. It has none of this. It's high technology. It's new technologies. Sure, salmon farms have progressed, but there's more salmon farms. They have to make pellets to feed these fish, and they have to rob the ocean of other wild fish. And in certain cases, a lot of cases nowadays, they're actually putting in pork parts and chicken parts. That's allowed by law, by the way. So you can put chicken beaks, feathers, feet, innards, all the stuff that you could not sell goes into the salmon pellets. And then you put a toxic chemicals in there to stabilize the fats. They call it, a preservative, an antioxidant or something, whatever they call it, to stabilize the fat, because salmon need to eat a lot of fat to grow. And if you see farmed salmon, they're very, very fatty. The more fat, the more money for the salmon industry, for this farm salmon industry. So these chefs know this dirty little secret. And I called a bunch of chefs last week, and I spoke to a bunch in Las Vegas, and they know it. They admit that, hey, yeah, salmon farming's terrible, but our salmon farming's different. Bottom line is, it's not different. They're buying from a tainted industry, but they're not willing to do the research, or they're not willing to actually, here it is, they're not willing to actually do the hard work to buy real wild salmon, and they want to run salmon all year, and they can buy cheap farmed salmon and make some coin off of it, make some money off of it, come into their food costs. But some of them, and a couple of the restaurants I called last week, it listed wild salmon on their menu. This happens a lot. They list wild salmon, but it's not wild salmon unless you know how to. The right question is, so here's what I ask when I go, or when I talk to these chefs. So is your wild salmon really wild? And they go, yes, it is really wild. I go, well, wild now is not in season. I go, well, it's not in season. Here's what they do. They say, oh, well, it's like wild. It's like wild salmon. See, the salmon is in pens. They're out there in the bays. They're out there in the ocean. They're ocean raised. A lot of the companies, if you go on Faroe Island's like, yeah, we raise them in the ocean in the natural pristine waters and paint this beautiful picture of some nets sitting out there in this beautiful ocean. Wrong. It's a salmon farm, folks. They're just glorifying what they're doing. It's a downright salmon farm. So if you're a farm-to-table restaurant, if you're a farm-to-table chef, and you're concerned about pure food, I would totally avoid farmed salmon altogether. There is a containment system-based salmon farm, but it's not that prevalent, and it costs more money, and it costs more money for the farmers to actually build this. The companies cost $7 million versus $1 million, but it's a containment system inland. What happens is, the biggest thing to these farming, so when they say, oh, they're raised in the ocean, that's your first clue that these salmon farms are sitting there. There's the feces, the salmon feces, the salmon manure just goes out in. They're swimming in it. That's loaded with everything that's happening in there is actually spreading out into the wild. And a lot of these places say, oh, we're better. But did you know, like, that national statistics in like Scotland are 25% mortality, 20% mortality. Canada, 20% mortality. That means 1 out of every 4 to 5 fish in fish farms is dying because of disease. So how can your salmon farm be so different? Now here's the second phase of this. Besides releasing toxins when they're alive, disease and viruses into the ocean, what happens is now you have to process the salmon. So you have to ship it off to a processing plant in that area. And now, by law, they have to treat the salmon sewage, the salmon waste, the salmon blood. And here's the thing, a lot of them don't do it properly. Cook Aquaculture got busted just recently. There's places in British Columbia and Canada. Let me see if I can just move over. Actually at my destination right now. But I really like doing videos in the car because I can set the camera and rock and roll and talk away. So let's see. Yeah, okay, cool. So the salmon farms it's bad news. It's bad news all around, and the chefs know it. The chefs have a dirty secret, but they're willing to make money. They're willing to say one thing and do another thing, because every chef knows the salmon is bad. And that's why a lot of these chefs will start stumbling and saying, well, yeah, it's like wild. It's raised in the ocean. It's natural. It's sort of wild, farmed. And I've had some of the best restaurants tell me this. The best restaurants justify, whether it's Rick Moon, the godfather of seafood, whether it's Herbert Keller, whether it's Charlie Palmer, Peter Kelly last week here, who's a famous chef just north of New York City, has a couple restaurants, and all these guys get on the phone and they try to justify that they're doing something that's much better, that's okay, knowing that it's not okay. Folks, farm salmon is not something you want to eat. Here's what I would say to one of those chefs. I would say simply, if you're 100% positive that your salmon is better than the others, let's call the company, find out what's in those feed pellets, and I want to watch you eat the feed pellets, and we're going to take some of this raw salmon, call me, send me a message, and we'll get it tested. We will test the raw salmon and exactly see what's going on, what's in that. I will get it tested. I know a lot of people now in this industry, some activists, some scientists, biologists, that would be more than happy to get this stuff tested in a laboratory and report back to that chef. So say, yeah, I will take a raw sample, I will pay for everything, and I want you to get a list of the ingredients in the pellets, and I want to watch you eat the pellets, because ultimately the salmon, what the salmon eat, becomes you. You are what you eat. The salmon is what they eat, and it passes along the food chain. So being top of the food chain, as we supposedly are, because we're so smart, all that stuff just comes onto us. The viruses, the antibiotics, the junk in there, the chemicals, the Monsanto chemicals, all of that all comes to us. I'm Chef Marcus Guiliano. Thanks for watching. Tell your favorite farm-to-table restaurant or any farm-to-table restaurant to get the wild farm salmon off the menu.